You've been listening to Sousa's March, the Thunderer, performed by the band of the US Marines. And the question always bothered me, why was that composition adopted by the company for its ceremonial march? The 1st of November is the first day of the Celtic New Year, which was noted by Sir Peter Gadsden in his acceptance speech on receiving the letters patent on the 1st of November 1983. And it turns out that one of the Celtic gods is Suchelos, the thunderer, and the thunderer's symbol is the hammer of creation. Now, hold that thought, because Rear Admiral Peter Hammersley was master in 1988-89, and he had previously been captain of the Royal Naval Engineering College at Manadon, otherwise known as the shore ship HMS Thunderer. Now, the company had been waiting for some suggestions or proposals from the Royal Engineers for a ceremonial march, but in the absence of the Royal Engineers actually coming up with any of the goods, he thought that the Thunderer would be an appropriate march, mindful of his naval connections. Whether he knew that this was also connected with the very day on which the company was founded and recognised is open to conjecture. But whatever the answer, the logic or reasoning for choosing the Thunderer as the company's ceremonial march is overwhelming and beyond question. Now, I'm going to talk in 4 sections. The first is the formation of the company, which I think is particularly interesting. Second part is going to be the relationship between the Worshipful Company Engineers and the livery, our philanthropic punching power, and finally, fellowship. Well, before I start talking about the formation of the company, I need to say a few words about Sir Peter Gadsden. He was a graduate from Cambridge University in geology and mineralogy, and he became a city trader in minerals on graduating. But he was an exceptionally creative and energetic man who became known as Mr. City. He had been Lord Mayor in 1979 to 1980, and he was a member of 7 livery companies. He is credited with transforming the role of Lord Mayor from a ceremonial office to one of being an ambassador for the city and the country. But interestingly, he was not a chartered engineer, but he did understand the importance of engineers to the city and the economy. And he did become a fellow of the Royal Academy of Engineering. Now, this is a photograph of the City of London Club in Old Broad Street, where it all began on the 9th of December 1982. At the very first meeting, they had decided that they needed £10,000 to cover the costs of setting up the company. They also agreed at that very first meeting that the engineers should either be chartered fellows of a professional institution or fellows of the Fellowship of Engineering. Well, on the 26th of January, barely 4 weeks later, it was agreed that there should be a class of membership that would enable individuals who, not being chartered engineers, had nevertheless made a distinguished contribution to engineering. The meeting on the 15th was attended by the embryonic court. It was agreed that the name of the company should be the Company of Engineers. At this stage, there was obviously no membership, and a challenge for any new company is to build up the membership quickly at the beginning. And therefore, it was agreed that there would be a reception in the city for presidents of the 16 professional engineering institutions. There are no details of that meeting, but I'm fairly sure it took place because they lent their support for the formation of the company, and they submitted names of prominent members. This was necessary in any event because a petition to the Court of Aldermen needed 40 supporting names of persons who would immediately become members. Now, the next important date was the 29th of June. This was a pivotal meeting. It was the first meeting where the company had actually been incorporated. It was also the first meeting where Raymond Cousins had been invited because he was clerk to the Worshipful Company of Woolmen. and it was considered necessary to have some knowledge in the matter of clerking. In due course, Raymond Cousins did eventually become the assistant clerk. Also invited to this meeting was the priest in charge at St. Catherine Cree, which remained the company's focus of worship until December 1994. Hugh Rom, the priest, officiated at the last carol service that was held in St. Catherine Cree in 1994. The 1st of November is an auspicious date in the company's history because it received its letters patent at the luncheon in Mansion House. In addition to Raymond Cousins, one of the other 51 members of the company who attended was Leonard Groom, the city engineer, and whose son Richard became master in 2017-18. To Richard's knowledge, he is the only member of the company who has had that relationship father-son. Of course, that is bound to be uncommon because the company cannot elect members who are not chartered engineers. From thinking about the company's formation on the 9th of December through to receiving the letters patent on the 1st of November was 326 days. That's a breathtaking speed in the world of the city and the livery. And in the next photograph, you can see the letters patent, which actually are hanging on the wall behind me as I speak. And you'll notice that it's all in marvelous handwritten calligraphy. On the next slide, we just note that the company's Royal Charter was presented 20 years later and 20 years ago. In 2003, the Court of Assistants, directed that the company should seek a Royal Charter, and discussions began with the Privy Council to produce a petition, charter, and ordinances. The Queen approved the grant of the Royal Charter on the 11th of February 2004, in less than a year from the court thinking it might be a good idea to become chartered. Well, why is it, or why was it a good idea to become chartered? The original support in 1983 by the Court of Aldermen had already given its approval that the company should seek a Royal Charter, in quotes, when the time was deemed right. Well, the Royal Charter, there you can see it in that slide, was duly issued, and you can see the size of the seal means it's a very grand document. However, the document is printed, so the wonderful excellence of calligraphy has obviously just been too expensive for the Royal Charters. To be granted a Royal Charter is significant. Historically, they go back to when there was no Parliament and charters were issued by the monarch of the day to create laws and bestow rights. The Worshipful Company of Weavers, who we share the office with in Sadler's House, was the first to be granted a Royal Charter. And today, there are about 750 organisations and bodies which have that distinction of a Royal Charter. That includes most of the livery companies, it includes the professional engineering institutions, a lot of them, not all, and it includes the BBC, etc. And you'll notice that the theme that underpins those organisations is the test of being in the public interest. So, how did the company establish its reputation for adopting the ethos and values of livery companies that were over 800 years in existence? Well, what I've done, I've listed 8 characteristics that I'm going to explain in the following slides. Born out of the livery. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, Sir Peter Gadsden was, as I've mentioned earlier, Mr. City. He was a member of 7 livery companies, including the apothecaries and clothworkers. But perhaps more importantly, Other founding members and early masters included members of the Worshipful Company of Fan Makers, Glaziers, Loriners, Tallow Chandlers, and Woolmen. The information technologists came along a bit later. But each of those livery companies had a master at some stage who was also a master of the Worshipful Company of Engineers. What that means is they understood the structure of the livery movement within the city. They understood the structure and the values and ethos of the livery. Well, there's a lot of other characteristics. So the second characteristic are the treasures. No self-respecting livery company would dare to lay a table without a heap of treasures. And those treasures include the badges of office and the plates and drinking vessels. I include in that the loving cups. And we were very fortunate that the Royal Engineers were generous in lending their silverware to us at the very outset. So within 4 or 5 years, the company already had much of the silverware that it now has today. So much so that not all the treasures can be displayed, and many items are rarely seen. The loving cups are brought out on a regular basis at all company dinners, and all attendees not only get to handle them, but if they're lucky, they get to drink out of them or a lucky dip for a chocolate liqueur. The Wilkinson sword, shown here, is a magnificent treasure. It's held by the beadle and leads the master and wardens at all company events in the City of London. And at the 40th anniversary banquet that I hosted 3 weeks ago, the Lord Mayor was interested in the sword. And during that discussion about the sword, I learnt that the Lady Mayoress is a member of the Wilkinson family. I draw your attention to the end of the handle, which is called the pommard, and it's the sun, and the sun has got 16 flames. And of the 16 flames, each flame represents one of the professional engineering institutions. And that's a shot of the sword unsheathed. And very few people ever get to see it unsheathed. The other requirement for any self-respecting livery company is the honorary chaplain. Now, the honorary chaplain is a role that you'll find in every livery company in the city. And they're required to officiate at the annual service, carol service, court meetings, and dinners. And in this company, the honorary chaplain also has a pastoral role with the almoner. Now, the first honorary chaplain, who I mentioned earlier, had worked in engineering. And the next two honorary chaplains, Michael West and Peter Hartley, both had engineering careers. Now, most of us knew Peter Hartley really well. He was a terrific friend of the company and had been our honorary chaplain for over 10 years until he sadly died quite suddenly last August in 2022. We were struggling to find a replacement for Peter because all these chaplains had that connection with engineering. Well, as a result of a conversation I had with an old colleague, I was introduced to our new chaplain, who has an engineering background, Jonathan Lee, who is a member of the IET, and to boot, he's also a King's Counsel. So we welcome him on board with great enthusiasm. Now, next are their military affiliations. The military affiliations are a matter of pride, and in some instances, as between livery companies, a matter of envy. Our connections with the Army through the Royal Engineers goes back to our founding, but the other engineering branches of the armed forces are well established. including the Corps of Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers, the Corps of Royal Signals, the Royal Navy, including ships HMS Sultan, Anson, Prince of Wales, and the Royal Air Force Defence College of Aeronautical Engineering. The chief engineer in each branch holds a senior rank, and that rank has the status of being an honorary liveryman of the company. Along with the military affiliations, we have the cadet detachments. The Armed Forces Cadets Force is not to be underrated. The young people who are serving cadets have fantastic opportunities and role models. At the banquet 3 weeks ago, I had the pleasure of welcoming the 33rd Detachment of Army Cadets, who provided the carpet guard. Most of them will have had a serving or retired senior officer speak to them, and the Princess Royal took time out to speak to many of them. Now, a few months ago, I attended the installation dinner of the new CO of the London area RAF cadets. He is now about to become a consultant surgeon at one of the large London teaching hospitals. In his acceptance or installation speech, he told us that he was brought up as one of 5 children by one parent in the East End. And he attributed all his success to the values he acquired while serving as a cadet. Participation. There's no point in having a livery company unless it's going to do something. So participation is an opportunity for us to promote our USP or our engineering expertise. We take part in pan-livery activities, most notably the Climate Action Group, the Food Initiative, and the Pro Bono Committee, which coordinates pro bono work across the livery. Past Master Gordon Masterton has established the Hall of Fame, and that's a close collaboration between the ironmongers and armourers and the other companies listed on the slide. And then across the livery, there are other interest groups. And the one that we've probably got most connection with at the moment is the construction interest group. So those are activities that we actually make a contribution to in terms of manpower. Trelaws, which is a college and school for very, very severely disabled young people with learning disabilities, the Lord Mayor's Charity, and the Mansion House Scholarship Scheme, they all benefit from grants and donations that we provide to keep their activities going. So that's an important part of what we do. Next is the relationship with the mayoralty. The Lord Mayor sits at the very top of the livery movement. So every master of a livery company owes some duty to support the mayor in his year. And the importance of briefing the Lord Mayor was underlined by Sir Michael Savary in 2004. He explained that briefing meant that when he went abroad and planning overseas visits, he goes with knowledge about those issues that he wants to promote. So our potential to support the Lord Mayor should not be underestimated. One of the opportunities that is available to liverymen is to accompany the Lord Mayor on his overseas trips, which can be especially valuable for promoting one's own business interests. Well, we have briefed and advised the Lord Mayor on small modular reactors and renewable energy in the recent past. And only last week, he asked me if we could assist him on some work he's doing with the recovery of satellites from space. And indeed, we are now actually involved in assisting him on that project that he's looking into. Of course, we also take part in the Lord Mayor's Show. We did that for the first time in 2005. and we've done so ever since. It's fun for those who participate, and it's also fun for the thousands of families who turn out to cheer. And it's interesting how many people, when you're walking by, shout for the engineers. Well, one of the other things we love to do is dine. And it's symbolic that the first dinner held on the 8th of March 1984, the first guest was the master of the Mercers. And that's no coincidence, because the Mercers are number one in precedence of all the livery companies. So the founding members at that time recognized that we had to be seen to be in the company of the great 12 livery companies. Other guests that we have come to dinner include the royal family. We've had Duke of Edinburgh, Duke of Kent, and the Princess Royal dine with us. We always have other masters come to our dinners, and occasionally other civic officers. We always say grace at the beginning of meal, and if it's one of the special dinners, we also sing grace. Dinners are never complete until we've toasted the King, the royal family, and the City of London Corporation. And I've mentioned the Loving Cup earlier as part of our treasures, and that is just pure theatre. And if you're interested, you can look that up elsewhere. It would just take me far too long to go through the intricacies of the theatre of the Loving Cup. Next is the question of livery halls. There are 42 of them, and only one of the modern livery companies has a hall. That is the information technologists. But having a hall is a matter of some division, because at one and the same time, it is an asset, but it's also a liability. In any event, the early members thought that a livery hall was befitting the status of the engineers' company. The first hall to be considered was the north abutment of Tower Bridge. Architects were appointed and plans were being drawn up. However, the question of costs was looked at carefully, and the scheme was quietly withdrawn. Well, in 1991, St Mary Cree, which you'll recall was where the honorary chaplain was the priest in charge, and that's where the livery company's focus for worship was going to be deconsecrated. And as a result of that, it was seriously looked at as perhaps being converted to a livery hall. Well, suffice to say, it didn't become a livery hall because the church was not deconsecrated and is still open today for services. In 1994-95, the company moved into the Wax Chandler's Hall as its first office in the city, as a fixed, if not entirely permanent, office. The residency meant that we moved into another parish, that of St Vedast, and all future company services have been held there ever since. And carol services are now held in St Peter ad Vincula in the Tower of London since 1995. The City Livery Committee conducted a survey 4 or 5 years ago as to what was important to members of the livery, and they surveyed 4,000 members, and of the 4,000 members, 95% said that the most important aspect of being part of a livery company was the giving to charity, was its philanthropic activity. Well, in the enthusiasm with which the company was launched in 1983, the Engineers Trust had £5,000 in its fund, and that £5,000 was from certain corporate donations and donations from some of the founding members. The interesting thing is that they gave away, by way of grant or award, over half of that £5,000. So confident were they that there would be enough money the next year for giving away a similar amount. Well, the fund now stands at approximately 1.7 million. And that money is used, as you will hear next year, when the Trust celebrates its 40th anniversary, is used to provide awards to military personnel and civilians. It's almost entirely used to promote interest in professional engineering, to help those young engineers who need support to study or to go on to do postgraduate work, as well as to recognise success and excellence in engineering. Well, I can't leave the question of the Engineers Trust without a mention of Notpla Limited. Notpla Limited won one of our prizes in 2021 and went on to win the Earthshot Prize in 2022. Our prize value was significantly less than the £1 million that Notpla picked up in 2022. The next attribute or characteristic are royal connections. Livery companies fall over themselves to get royal connections, royal patronage. And we've been exceptionally lucky that from the day one, His Royal Highness the Prince Philip accepted an invitation to become the first honorary liveryman. And he remained an honorary liveryman throughout the rest of his life. You can see there that the Duke of Kent became an honorary liveryman, and he's also a court assistant emeritus. And we've had the Princess Royal dine with us on several occasions, and she was with us 3 weeks ago in her own right as a liveryman of this company. Well, last but not least is the whole question of fellowship. One of the best experiences of being in the company is attending a dinner. We have great conversations over dinner. So it's discourse at dinners with fine dining in livery halls and other exclusive venues. The technical visits are a very important part of each year's programme. And I've listed the type of technical visits that are regularly undertaken or have been undertaken over the recent years. I remember in particular visiting Hinkley Point C construction site a few years ago. I went to Barrow-in-Furness to see HMS Anson being constructed in the shed. And I also remember going to the airfield at Doncaster to see the Vulcan bomber. So there's something for everyone when it comes to technical visits. The out-of-towns were not an original feature of the company. The first of them was in 1994. And you can see from the cities and towns I've listed, we've pretty well covered the UK. There've also been 4 overseas trips to Basel, Budapest, Chinon, and Dublin. And these are a real feature of the company. It's the highlight for the master, and it's often a highlight for all those who've been on these out of towns and look forward to the next one next year. It's the best way of actually getting to meet and make friends with other people in the company. So those are the characteristics, but one of the important things that we have to consider is how we communicate with our members. Well, the first newsletter was issued in 1986. And that newsletter transitioned into what we now recognize as the Swordsman in 1998. The interesting thing about the Swordsman when it first came out is it was not only issued in hard copy, but it was also online as in digital format as well. And 1998 was when we launched our first website. I'm sitting here in the office surrounded by copies of the Swordsman edition number 51, which is going in the post tomorrow, so the clerk assures me. So we have 350 members. We've got 4 Lord Mayors, one of whom is currently the Lord Mayor, who are associated with the company. We have all the treasures we ever need. We have clear succession planning. and we have awards that are the envy of many other livery companies. So, what next? When will we reach a membership of 500? When will we reach £5 million in our trust fund? When will we have our next Lord Mayor? When will we, this is really important, when will we replace the chocolates in the loving cups with wine? And will we ever have our own livery hall? How successful we can judge our company to be will be at our 50th anniversary, and will be measured by the answers to the questions I've just posed. The level of success will require rededication to the values of the company. And what are they? Participation in city affairs, philanthropy, and fellowship.